All right. So the purpose of this video is quite simple. I'm here to tell a story about my time in high school, particularly concerning a particular principal while I was in high school, who was not principal all that long. Maybe less than a whole semester. In fact, maybe if I thought, I'm pretty sure that is right. So anyway, let me actually back up a little bit. I remember when I was actually in 8th grade and we were, preparing to transition. But when I say we, I mean my class, the 8th graders, we were preparing to transition to high school. And that's when we first met this guy, the new principal. And I'd rather not give his name here. But anyway, several people would remember him if I gave a lot of detail. But anyway, when I was in 8th grade, this new principal was appointed to the high school, which I don't know exactly what the deal was. I don't know if he was already working for the high school or if he was just doing this out of goodwill. I don't know, but he was actually coming to us while we were still in middle school, and he was meeting us and talking to us and getting to know us and trying to welcome us and say, hey, we're really glad you're coming to high school. I'm the new principal and I'm really cool. Like he was trying to sell himself really hard, and he was very entertaining. He was quite funny. And I remember when I was in 8th grade, it seemed like for whatever reason, so many of the kids were wearing Led Zeppelin and or AC/DC shirts all the time. Led Zeppelin and AC/DC shirts were just so common. I don't know if that many of us were actually listening to Led Zeppelin and or AC/DC, but it seemed like everybody had these shirts. So I remember that was one thing he actually brought up when he met us and he talked to us. I remember him talking to all of us in the cafeteria, and he was just talking about what he had done, his job, all the stuff he had, all the schools that he'd been at and stuff like that. He had a long career in the school system already at that point. And I remember him mentioning that he loved AC/DC. Who knows if he really did? Maybe he did, but regardless. So he was getting over pretty well with the students in middle school. And then when we actually made the transition to high school, well, didn't do quite as well. He seemed like he always wanted to touch our hearts. Like he always wanted to speak to us and make us like he would call us into the auditorium, and he would talk about whatever. He would talk about his life and his career. He would talk about his mother who had died not that long beforehand and stuff like this. And something about my grade is when I say we were all, I wasn't so much of a bad kid, but for the most part, my grade, they were very rowdy. Most teachers and administrators that had dealt with us up to that point would tell you that up to that point, my class was by far easily the worst class that had ever gone through that school system in the memory of anyone that was working there at the time. They would all tell you that, I think, because they told us that and they told our parents that, and it just wasn't a secret. And we knew it. We knew we were bad. Again, I say I was always really good, but for the most part, not so good. But anyway, so there were some things going on backstage. This principal wasn't all that popular with everybody. Some other teachers and administrators weren't getting along with him. So he was already sort of on thin ice, so to speak, in a lot of ways. And the thing about him, though, here's what really sealed his fate at this school system. And again, it's really best to hear my father tell this story because he was the witness to all of this stuff. And I know that that's a lot of backstory, but I promise I'm getting to it. And you also have to know a little bit about my father. He's a really more of a happy-go-lucky type kind of thing, but also a very shrewd businessman, sort of very pragmatic. And when it comes time to do pen to paper, and create policies and stuff like that, he's very serious about work, is what I'm saying. And he would tell you that all these years on the school board, he got used to a certain amount of craziness. Just some of the stories he could tell you, some of the just insane stuff that would come up at those meetings. When he first came on the board, he would be like, oh, what? You know, but after a while, he just got used to all that. And so he stopped responding that way. He stopped just thinking, and he just thought, okay, yeah, okay, whatever. Like that's just another crazy thing. So here's what really happened. Here's what happened. And this was several years into Dad's tenure on the school board. This principal who is struggling to catch the fear and or respect of the students, let's say, he decides, he hatches this plan. He's got this new master plan of how he's going to, get our attention and make us sit up straight and pay attention. And we're going to sit there and be like, wow. And we're just really going to sit under his learning tree, and he's going to impart his wisdom and his knowledge and all that. He's going to sober us up. Here was his proposal for sobering us up. And I don't know if this happened at a school board meeting. I feel like it couldn't have, because the public never knew about this. I guess he went to the school board privately or something, or he went to one or two members. I don't know how exactly it worked. But anyway, somehow or other, he went to some members of the school board, I guess, including my father, and he explained he was going to have a shooter. I'm talking bang, 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 a shooter, a live gunman. I hope that YouTube doesn't censor this. But he was going to have a guy with a real gun come into the school and start firing, not actual like rounds that would damage, but he was going to come in firing blanks or something like that. So he wasn't actually going to be hurting anybody physically, but he was going to do this. And this wasn't going to be some sort of a scheduled, pre-planned exercise on part of everyone at the school. This was the principal. This was his own thing. This was his idea. And most people were not going to be in on the operation. He was going to know it. Maybe the assistant principal was going to know it. I don't remember for sure about that one. The resource officer was going to know it. And I guess the whole school board would have known it. And that was it. That's the plan. Teachers aren't going to know. They're not going to know this is coming. It's just going to happen one day. And they're going to have to go through a legitimate live shooter scenario. Everybody get down, hide, barricade the door, whatever. Like absolute hysteria is going to break out in the school. This was his plan. The teachers weren't going to know. The students weren't going to know. The parents of the students weren't going to know. I don't know if the sheriff's office was going to know. It seems like the sheriff's office would have known. If the resource officer knows, I think surely the sheriff's office would have known, but I'm not sure. Again, my father would tell you those details better. But the funniest part of this whole story to me is hearing Dad talk about going home that night, having heard this and thinking about it, and immediately just sort of dismissing it and saying, oh, that idea, that's crazy. Like he had seen so many crazy ideas. He was just sort of immune to them to some extent. But he goes home that night and he just keeps thinking about that. It just keeps rolling around in his head. And he tries to go to bed and he's lying there. And he's lying there and he's thinking and he's thinking and he's thinking. And he goes from thinking, and that's crazy, to thinking, now that's really crazy, to thinking, that's really crazy, really crazy. So he ends up calling the superintendent of the school system, who for some reason didn't know about this yet. And this was at, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4 a.m. It is the middle of the night. And he's just wide awake, just as sober-minded as could be. My father, the superintendent happened to be a woman. he called her on the phone and he said, I want to run this by you, if you don't mind. And he told her about this plan. And he said, now I want to tell you this, and I want you to tell me what you think, because I just can't seem to stop thinking about this. So he tells her the plan, and she says, what? He wants to do what? And he said, yeah, I mean, he came and told us he wanted this live gunman to come in, and he didn't want anybody to know this was going to happen except for a few select people. You know, which, by the way, the resource officer beforehand, he was he was not for this at all. He actually said, if a man comes in here with a gun, I'm trained to shoot to kill. That was his those were his comments in the beginning. But anyway, so my dad tells the superintendent about this, and the superintendent is just jaw dropped. I mean, just can't believe it. And my dad's just saying, now, I feel like this is really insane. Am I crazy to think that this is really, really insane? And she says, well, no, this is insane. This is really crazy. So he's like, okay, well, good. I'm glad I'm not the only one. So she tells him, says, well, you know what? You just go to sleep tonight. You just go to bed. Don't worry about this at all. Don't think about this anymore. I will have this handled before the sun comes up. He said, okay. And he went to sleep. And the next morning, the man was gone, fired, out. And when I say fired, I mean not fired. He was not fired. No. He was given the opportunity to resign, because that's the most diplomatic solution, I guess, or something. And so he's gone, and now they're thinking about, well, who's the next principal? And they move on to that. But here's the thing that drives me crazy about the whole story. This is the thing about the story that makes me think, okay, actually, everyone in the story is crazy, and I'm the only one with any good mind here. Because I ask the question to my dad. I say, well, Dad, why did you let him resign? Why didn't you fire him? I mean, given this and some of the other things that have been going on, it seems like you have grounds to fire the guy. Like, you can actually fire the guy. You don't have to give him the chance to resign. You don't have to be diplomatic. Well, you know, if we fire him, it'll really hurt him and he may not be able to get a job. But he doesn't need to have a job in the school system. That's the whole point, isn't it? I mean, that's why I would have fired the guy. He doesn't need to go to another school. Am I right? Maybe I'm crazy. But it in the same breath, my dad would say, well, you know, and it turns out when we did our homework and we look back and we remember some of the people we talked to before we hired him, turns out he did have a little bit of a weird past. He had done some things before. He had pulled some crazy stunts before. He'd had some crazy ideas, blah, 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 you know, but they didn't fire him. They let him resign. So then he found us and he came to work for us. And I'm like, well, do you not see the cycle? Someone has to fire the guy. He doesn't need to be in the school system. Duh. Well, but you know, but it's cool. Well, all right. Well, fine. Fine. I guess it's not up to me. But anyway, that's what makes me think everybody's crazy except for me. That's one of those stories that makes me think everybody is crazy except for me. Or maybe I'm crazy and everybody else. I don't know. So anyway, that is the story of the short-lived tenure of that principal at my high school. So thank you for listening. I know it's been a little long, but I felt like all of that backstory was helpful, interesting, something of the like. So be good, y'all.